All right, so hey, we're at Innovative Spaces here today. One of the things we get asked about a lot are what tools we use. So today we're kind of going to go over some of the tools that we use in our trade. This is my son Tio, who works for us. He's one of our technicians, and we'll be kind of looking at metal and woodworking tools that we commonly use. Tio, what's your favorite grinder?
So preferably, it depends what I'm working with. If I'm working with thicker aluminum, I like to use a corded grinder, because if I try to use a cordless grinder, I will instantly run through the battery in a matter of minutes, and that's why I prefer to have a lot more power with the corded grinder. But when I'm going through cutoff work or really simple cuts, thin aluminum, or just shaving down an edge, I usually go with the cordless because it's quick and you throw a flapper on there and it's speedy. But at the same time, depends what you're cutting through.
So, speaking of cutting, there's a couple different techniques for cutting aluminum. We have the old school hand method, and you'll notice in these you'll have a green handle and a red handle. These are rights and lefts, and that basically determines which way the metal is peeling off of your cut. So as you're cutting through,
green is left hand.
Green is left hand, it's going to push the metal up, whereas the red is the right hand, and that's going to be pushing the metal down. So you usually want to use a right hand if you're going counterclockwise on a curve, and the green is great for going clockwise on a curve. Now there's other methods of cutting too. So this is a double cut that basically does this without all the hand effort. So it's a pretty easy way of doing quick cuts.
But not as clean.
Not as clean, and you have to be wary as you're doing cuts with a double cut that it can scar up the aluminum. I find it's really beneficial to lean slightly away from the material that I want to keep. This will cause marks. This will allow the marks you see be on this piece that you're throwing away and not on the piece you're keeping. Now there's another option too, it's called a nibbler. So a nibbler is a tool that it's basically like a hole punch that does it really quickly. And that's great for cutting curves, but if you look closely, you can see it kind of leaves a serrated edge. So if you're going to be covering that area, it's fine to do, and then you can clean it up with the grinder. And this is where a cordless grinder comes in really handy. You can come in and kind of shape and clean up your metal. So that's how we cut our aluminum. Tio, you want to show us how we go ahead and put our aluminum together and how we use our different rivets?
Yes, let me see what we got here.
So you basically have two different size rivets that you're going to use in Airstreams. You're going to use an 1/8 inch rivet and a 5/32. And in conjunction with those rivets is a really handy tool called a cleco. In a cleco, you need a cleco plier to use it. And what it does is it compresses it, allows it to go through the hole, and it locks it in behind. And we'll give you an example of that.
Like this. So you take a piece of metal. For example, if you would like to attach two pieces of metal, drill a hole, and before you put any glue, so you make sure everything is fit the right way, you attach it with a cleco.
And this is basically a temporary rivet. And you can do this with either the 1/8 inch rivet or the 5/32. And the 5/32 is the exterior rivet, and it's a different type of rivet. It's actually what we call a buck rivet. So now a buck rivet actually gets done a completely different way. So exterior rivets are a little bit different. We use a 5/32. Same process for clecoing. Locks it in. Now, when we go to do our exterior rivets, this is when we start using what we call a bucking tool. We're going to use a buck rivet, a solid rivet. The solid rivet gets placed in the hole. Now, there'll be Sikaflex in between your joint to make it waterproof, and usually a little bit of Sikaflex on your rivet tip. You'll often find that you need to hog out the hole just a little bit so that the buck rivet slips through. Now here's where it becomes challenging because a buck riveting is a two-person job. Sometimes you have to give it a little tap to get it in. As you can see right now, the back of the rivet is not compressed. The front is all the way in the hole. At this point, this is a two-part job. You have a bucking iron and your gun. We compress from the back with the iron and from the front with the gun. Let's do just a little bit more on that. It compresses the rivet around and it makes it a very solid structural rivet. This is the only structural rivet we will be using in the Airstreams. The interior rivets are just pop rivets. So to kind of recap, you're going to need a way of cutting your aluminum. You're going to need to be able to drill it, clean the edges, and you're going to need to be able to attach it. And as I said, we dry fit all of our pieces using clecos to hold them in place. Before we go to set it the final time, we'll remove the clecos, put in our Sikaflex, put the clecos back, skipping every other one, and then set our buck rivets in between and then pull the rest of the clecos and finish riveting it up. As far as caulking guns, there's a couple different styles. My favorite is the old pool.
And speaking of Sikaflex, just because not everybody has it, it is a construction sealant that we use that is very high quality, waterproof, and holds very, very well after dried.
Now, I like to use the handgun. Tio's not so much into the handgun. This is Tio's bad boy right here.
This is my Milwaukee cordless caulking gun. We get stuff done fast. We will shoot it all over and make sure it's very covered. And it gets the job done really quick, as multiple people can know. It pushes out a lot faster of a goop than the hand can do.
So that's your basic metal tools that will get you through the project. You're obviously going to need squares. Best way to mark up your stuff is with a Sharpie to mark your lengths, cut lines. This is also a handy tool. This is basically just a rivet template gauge. So you can stretch it or compress it to have different lengths in between. Once you have it to the length you want, you can place along, make a little dot mark wherever you want to drill your hole, and then you can drill away and it'll keep your rivet pattern really nice and clean. Now, hand cutting is going to be a pain. It's going to take a lot of extra work. We kind of cheat here. We have a big 12-foot shear. That makes cutting our work a lot easier. We also use a brake, which is behind you. But those are tools you're probably not going to have in a DIY project. So that was kind of our basic metal tools that you can get, the minimum you can get away with. So just to recap, you're going to need a grinder, you're going to need a way of cutting your aluminum, and you're going to need a way of attaching it. Buck riveting is for the exterior. Interior, we use just a pop rivet. I prefer these, the Marson rivet guns. We wear them out. As you see, most of our tools are pretty well worn. We do a lot of work with them. But it's a good rivet gun. You can swap out your heads. It's important to keep in mind that you want to have the right head for the right size rivet. There's a different head for a 5/32 versus an 1/8.
As you can see here, this fits.
Well, here's actually the 5/32 here. This is an Olympic rivet. This is a rivet you will use if you cannot actually get to the back of an exterior rivet. These should not be used exclusively. These are for situations where you cannot access the back. You can put in a buck rivet. They work a little bit differently. I got the 1/8 inch one in. It helps to compress it when you do it.
And another thing about the Olympic rivets is it basically takes away the two-person job with a bucking rivet and makes it a one-person job. So you could replace a big patch with these, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's not as structurally solid as a buck rivet, for example.
So these you just pull until they pop. Now I'll leave a little head sticking out. There's a couple ways to deal with that. You can use dikes and cut it. You can feather it in with the grinder to make it smooth, and then when you polish, it blends in. There is a tool, it's about $200, that cuts the head. You still clip it, but it will cut it so it's round. Do I think they're worth the money? Probably not. Some people swear by them. Some people aren't a big fan of them. So you might be getting the idea that drills are a big part of the job. We're big Makita fans here. As you can see, we have a lot of Makita stuff. It's nice to kind of pick a brand and stick with it because your batteries are all interchangeable. So if you start mixing brands, it doesn't work as well. We do make a few exceptions to the rules, such as this PEX crimper that's a Milwaukee. This is just a really cool tool though. A lot easier than hand. But first thing you want to really invest in is a good set of drills. I like an impact and a drill. When you get into woodworking and setting screws, impacts are invaluable. They really help out a lot. But for basic woodworking tools, not everybody can afford to have a whole shop set up with big table saws and everything else. You can really make do with more hand tools nowadays. One of the best hand tools that they've come out with, I think, is the track saw. So this one here is a Fez tool. And the Fez tool saw, basically, you can clamp this to any surface. It has grooves and a tracking system that allows it to sit on this groove, and it cuts a perfectly straight line. Now, this one is a little bit pricey. Bosch makes one that's about, 2/3 the price. But this is a way to keep from having to have a big table saw. You can put these tracks together to extend them. You can get up to 12 feet of track, and it clamps together. You can straight edge things. You can use it for your plywood. It's really a really versatile tool not to have a big table saw set up. This is a Makita. This is a beautiful little unit. It runs off of 2 batteries. It's very precise. It does a great job. This will help you with all your trim and everything else. So these 2 tools right here will allow you to get a lot of your work done. Now, you'll have noticed that everything in an Airstream is curved. One of the tools that you're going to have to get really good at, and one of the jobs you'll do that is really important, is learning how to scribe. This is a couple dollar tool, a compass. This tool will allow you to scribe and shape your wood and panels into your wall. And the basic way that works, if we pretend this is the wall, we can set a piece of wood up to it. You can change the width of your tool. So if you go to your minimum depth, you can then trace. Sorry, it's moving a little bit on me. You can trace it, and then you have your cut line. I don't know if you can see that, but you cut this line, it'll fit right into this curve. Easiest and most affordable way to do all your curve cuts is with a jigsaw. So some of the most important tools you're going to have as you do your interior build out is a jigsaw, a track saw, and a chop saw. And then of course your drills are really important as well. Routers are very handy for when you want to put some character to your wood, because you don't want everything to be square edged. We use an 1/8 inch round over a lot. This little Makita is a great little tool. It's battery operated. It's a really smooth operating little router. Nailing stuff together, you have a couple options. You can go with staples, pin nails. This is a micro pin nailer, which is great for little trim and just to hold things until the glue sets. It's actually has a headless little pin, so it makes the tiniest little hole. I would not count on this to hold your material, but it is great for holding something in place until the glue sets and dries. So that's your basic tool set. You'll obviously need a lot of router bits, countersinks, screws, and you kind of have to pick what really matters to you in that. But once again, Try to stick with one brand. It's going to make your life a lot easier for getting more batteries, having a universal battery throughout your tools. It's really just a great way to go. As we move into plumbing, there's a couple tools you're going to need. So most of your plumbing is PEX. So with PEX pipe, you need a PEX cutter. They're really cheap and simple. Bam. You're going to need your PEX rings, your PEX fittings, and there's a couple ways to do your PEX. You can do it by hand, as we were talking about earlier, or you can use a tool like this. This is a crimping tool.
This is much more of a portable tool right here.
This is the cheap route. Okay, so this right here is about $100, and was it 40?
45 bucks.
45 bucks and on Amazon. And you basically put this over your crimp ring, and then you compress it till it closes. That's set. It's never coming off.
Never leaking.
Never leaks. You'll want to water test everything. This is the new lazy man's way. Much easier. Same result. So these two tools right here, well, these two right here are going to be your main tool when you're running your fresh water lines. For all your plumbing lines, it's ABS glue. You can cut it with a hacksaw. You can cut it with the Sawzall. There's lots of different ways that you can run your other pipe fittings. When you're doing your tanks in your plumbing, there's a couple routes to do it. Most people will go in and order their tanks with the spin weld fittings in it, and I recommend doing that unless you've had some time to practice. We do our own spin weld fittings with a router. I don't have a head here right now, but it basically locks onto the fitting you're putting in. You drill a hole, you place it on your surface, and you get it up to speed, watching it carefully not to melt all the way through the tank, and stop it. And then it dries, and it's a great solid lock. It basically just melts the plastic. Your basic electrical tools are pretty simple. You have a couple different tools you're going to need. I would always recommend a voltmeter. Very handy, especially for continuity testing. When you're running wires, it's a great way to find out if you've nicked your wires anywhere by running a continuity test. You're going to need some good wire strippers and a crimp tool. Now there's different size crimp tools that you can get. This goes up to an 8 gauge. This is great for battery cables and stuff like that. Solar. Some of your battery lugs though are going to take a much bigger crimper. I don't have it out today, but it's an expensive tool. But we can take a look at that on another time. All right, well that kind of wraps us up for today. Thank you, Tio, for helping me show all about it. Make sure you get a good level.
Good straight edge.
Good straight edge. But follow us on Instagram. We're going to do a lot more videos about more specific tools. We'll be doing reviews of different brands and so forth as we go down the road. Thanks.
Peace.